I'm wearing my, this color is the color you see in Dutch painting. There's a certain type of yellow. I don't know. That's why I like to wear shirts that have colors of the paintings that we're doing. Well, anyway, look for this cover when we're looking at Bruegel and Vermeer particularly. Yeah, so we're still in Holland here, and Bruegel and Vermeer. There's Peter Bruegel the elder. His children were also painters, so they were the younger, but no one was as accomplished or well known as the dad, as the father. And he lived 1530. Let me pop up a share screen here and Wikipedia briefly. All right. Can you see that? Can you see the Wikipedia?
Just a lot of words right now, yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right. So he lived from 1525 or 30, they don't know his exact birthday, and died in 1569. So if he was born in 1530, he didn't even make age 40, but died a fairly young man. And he was trained as a printmaker, and that's what he did in etching in the early part of his career. And it wasn't until later in life that he started painting. He spent time in Italy, and that influenced him. You see the Alps. Sometimes he's doing Dutch landscapes, and he puts the Alps in the background. And there's no mountains in Holland, so they're imaginary landscapes. But what he's really well known, what's really delightful about Bruegel is his what's called genre paintings. Let's just skip down here. And also just a larger context. It was a time in the 1500s, there mid 1500s, when he was alive in Holland, massive social change and religious change. The Protestant Reformation had just happened. There was war going on. Spain, controlled the Low Countries. And so the Catholic Church was clamping down on Protestantism, about the Catholic Church, very traditional idea about religious art, and Protestants were going their way. The Protestant riots, they were breaking into Catholic churches and burning all the imagery, the icons, the statues, and tearing them down. So it was a whole time of massive change that he came into his maturity. But what he's known for is called genre paintings. And this was really, before the subject of paintings was supposed to be religious. So Bible scenes, paintings of Jesus and his mother, or saints, St. Francis, whatever. So it was really and if there were more contemporary scenes in those Italian Renaissance paintings, it was always within a religious context. All right. So, but Bruegel and other artists of his time, they broke away from that, and they just started doing painting peasants, painting everyday life. That's one big classification, and the other were just plain landscape paintings. All right, so but no one could do these genre paintings that Bruegel did. No one could do them as well, as delightful and incredible, masterly way that he did it, with composition, with his use of color. And he's telling a story, which we'll say they're stories, but they're rich with meaning. And there's so much going on in some of these paintings that we'll see that you really have to zoom in, and there's all these interactions going on. A lot of it's symbolic. His way of staying with the religious theme would be to paint like Hieronymus Bosch, to paint someone committing a sin, for instance. Okay. But other than that, he gives us a window into Dutch everyday life back then, peasant life, and it's this but it's universal. It's like, it evokes for me, and I think a lot of people who look at his paintings, a longing for this lost world, pre-industrial world. All right, and when village life, people lived in villages, and everyone knew each other, and they worked together, they had fun together, they went ice skating together, they et cetera, and all the feasts and weddings and the hunts and the meals and the festivals and the dances that were part of the village life rituals that they talked about. You know, he's painting that, and no one had ever done it like he did it before, right? And he gives you various viewpoints. Sometimes close in, you're right there in the middle of the festival. Sometimes it's more backed off, detached, almost like a bird's eye view of the scene. His winter landscapes. He did a series. He was commissioned to do a series of seasons, and how many things did he do? 6 of them, I think, or 12, I think, seasonal paintings, and several are lost. But they're I forget how many have survived. Quite a number, and they're wonderful. We'll look at some of those. So. Yeah. So, but he also did religious scenes, the conversion of St. Paul, the blind leading the blind. He did scenes from the Bible also. Okay. So, his drawing ability was amazing. His compositional, you'll see a lot of use of reds and greens in there, and ochres and browns, but not too much blue. Maybe because blue was so expensive, but reds and greens and muted yellows. So let's look at a few here from Wikipedia. Let me bring this over here. All right. So,
Joe, this is Gilda.
hi, hey, Gilda, welcome.
And I'm not in the meeting. I'm just listening because I can't get into the meeting.
Why can't you get in?
I keep putting in the passcode purity,
Right?
but it says it's incorrect.
Really? That's because you're not pure. You're not pure enough.
That is the problem.
You have to have a certain level of personal purity, or else you can't get in.
I did brush my teeth. So that's as pure as I get.
I say that, I want everyone and I can say that to Gilda, because we're all friends. We were neighbors in the 70s back in Wilmington, Delaware. So we're all buddies. So I can tease her. You know, she's like a sister to me, right, Gilda?
So anyway, you're looking at Bruegel.
Yes, we're looking at Bruegel. Keep trying to get in. I don't know. You just you go into in the Circle Center. You go into that. You don't click on art appreciation. You click on the very first entry of the day, which says at 6 a.m.
Yes.
And open that.
Yep.
Okay. That's weird. I don't know what it is. All right. So just keep okay.
It's whatever it is.
Yeah. So here,
I'll just look at some Bruegels while you're talking.
Okay. So here's a good example of peasants who are the land of Cockaigne. I don't know. It's an illustration of a medieval mythical land called Cockaigne. I'm not familiar with that, but it looks like they are sleeping, taking a nap. I don't know. And there's a lot of details here I don't understand, but just to give you a sense of, look at the colors he's using, these very natural earth tones, the ochres and some of it, the gray greens, and also the colors that the reds. The reds are the most vivid colors you'll see that, and he uses his reds to create a sense of unity in a painting. You see that throughout. So there's all these muted, grayed out earth tones throughout, gray greens, and then the reds are the ones that capture your eye and like walk you through the painting. You could see it like that. Okay.
They look dead.
They look dead, or else they look like they've either are. Yeah, they could, but there's. I assume there's sleep, or just this guy looks like he's staring up at the sky, or
Either they've worked really hard, or they're drunk.
Yeah, or the drunk. Right? Yeah. I don't understand the tilted table. That it's some myth that he's illustrating. So probably I have to know the myth, I guess.
Isn't there a rat in the disc?
A rat in the distance. This is a pig.
No, there's a pig and there's a rat in the dish right there.
Oh, a rat in the dish. A rat
right
in the
there.
dish.
Right there. Yeah.
Is that a rat? Okay, yeah. Or some kind of a animal. Yeah. All right. And I don't know. This looks like a brown cactus. That's weird. It's kind of out of place.
Yeah.
All right, but it seems like he's illustrating a folktale or a fairy tale, so it's not, literally realistic. Here's a good one that's very Bruegel-esque. Again, it's called The Peasant and the Nest Robber. Yeah. So anyway, you can talk. Just anything you see or notice or like or feel free to share.
Oh, damn.
There's a again
Yeah,
the red.
can
Go
I
ahead.
interrupt for 1 second to say
Sure.
to Jilda, try going back out again for this presentation. Hit on, what Joe said at the top of the calendar list view, hit on the very top thing, which says, and then
Yes,
you have to
did
go
that.
down and hit click here. And I know, but maybe try it one more time and then enter purity.
Yeah.
So
Okay, I'll go, I'll
go out and try coming back in
Yeah,
one more
yeah.
time. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
that's what I'll do. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So there's just looking at it compositionally, the eyes, he walks you through this the verticals in the painting, the peasant, and then the trees that kind of walk you into the background, and then this sweep here.
Could I say something?
Definitely feel free to.
When you type in purity, be
Oh.
sure to put the I in.
Oh, okay. Not purity.
I'm trying right now.
Okay.
Oh, it took me back to my previous one. It already says incorrect meeting pass
That's strange.
code.
Every once in a while, people have that problem. I don't understand it. Are you on a tablet or a computer, Gilder?
I'm on my iPad, but I can go try on my.
I think it could be an iPad problem. That I think Susan.
I've never had.
Yeah.
I haven't never had this before. I'll
Okay.
try
What
on
if you
my-
put the numbers in first? I had to put the numbers of the meeting in first.
Oh, you did? That's strange.
Yes, and
Oh.
then I got to purity in.
Oh, okay.
I'll try that.
You,
The
the
meeting
number,
ID.
because Don does.
Here's one called the peasant. This is a good illustration. The peasant dance, right? Everyone see that? And their point of view, you're right there. I mean, you're one of the dancers, right? Gives you the feel that you're right in. It's like he's got a camera. It's not he snapped the photo of the incident. And if you look at this, is what he does. Everyone's doing something. Everyone's in a conversation, and the expressions on people's face. It's like he snapped the photo, and he caught everybody in mid-action, mid-conversation. It's extremely realistic, and it all works. It all seems very authentic, and he's great at getting the perspective by using the people get shorter and shorter as they go into the background. And then in a lot of his paintings, there's clusters of action. So you'll have the people here at the table. There's these people here in the background. Looks like there's a man kissing a woman. There's things going on inside here. Maybe that's where people get in their drinks. There's people at the table, this little cluster. So there's like layers of action. You see that in all his paintings, and they all can engage you. It's like visually, you can do that literally now, zoom in on an area of the painting, or just do it with your eye. Just, look what's going on, and it's like you're standing, surveying the scene. And so here's, people are drinking, it's a feast, and then the dancing, and it's a masterly composition. It's just really where he leaves enough open space, so it's not, and then he's got these two legs they're doing a jig here, right here, and then it just kind of works its way back. The fact, you've been at street festivals, and there's a lot of action in the background. You want to know, what's going on there, and you just walking through a street festival and just taking it all in. The church in the background. Now there's that yellow. See that? See, it matches my shirt, right?
Yay!
Yeah, I knew that. It's Something maybe put that on. There's a name for that yellow, and I can't think of it. But what you don't see is blue, because actually Vermeer used blue. We'll get to that, and very expensive. The lapis lazuli. I don't know. Vermeer had an in there with, but he was spending lots of money on his blue. I don't think Bruegel had the money to buy to spend. So, all right. And again, keep in mind, you know, reds and greens are complementary color, and he's throughout his paintings, you'll see him using those bright reds and then often muted greens, and so the reds pop more. I'm very much like Chinese art. When you look at traditional Chinese paintings and prints, they love red and green. What's this one called? Can anybody see the name? The burger. What's it called? What's the title of it? Anyway, it doesn't matter. So
It's the beggars and then the cripples.
okay, and the cripples. Yeah. All right. So must have been a lot of. I think either the plague or leprosy was still around in Europe then, right? And I don't know if these are lepers or what are they?
Yes.
Pardon?
Yes, it would have been there.
Leprosy, yeah, was still around. And so what's this man wear? I wonder why he has to wear this like lampshade hat. I don't know what that's about. Oh, what this is over here. Can't tell. But it's like you're walking by and they're asking for money or asking for food. It's like they're or someone ahead of you has just walked by and they're by this group of beggars. And look, some of the people have their face hidden, right? Their face is probably rotted away so much that they don't want to show their face. Maybe the hats are just things people picked up off the ground or from the trash to cover the wounds in their head. That's a possibility. Whoops, go back one. This landscape reminds me a bit of the background of Mona Lisa. It's very similar in the color and the way it recedes. It's a what's the name of this one? Is it a Bible story? Is it Mary? Can you see the name?
Landscape with the flight into Egypt.
Flight into Egypt. Okay, so it's the story of Mary and Joseph and the escaping Herod. In this idealized landscape. So he did some Bible things, but again, the use of greens, very much like Italian landscapes at the time. This is one of his classics. This is a masterpiece. I mean, it is so brilliant. And we're going to show you a short video on one of the Smart Histories talking about this, but this is one of the scenes from he had the commission to do this seasons of the year. This is winter. And just tell me what you see, just to share your initial impressions of this. And if you're, make sure you're not on mute if you want to say something. Anyone? Any comments? Marge, are you there?
I'm here.
All right, and what's your first impressions of this painting?
Cold.
Cold, yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, that's what he's trying to convey. It's the middle of winter, it's bitter and it's cold up there. So it must be January or something.
It looks like the hunters have just
What's
come
happening?
back.
Yeah. What do you see about the hunters? What do you notice about them?
Well, they got a big pack of dogs and they look pretty skinny.
Yeah, so what's that tell you?
They didn't catch anything.
Yeah, it doesn't look like the dogs look underfed. So he's telling us something. The dogs are skinny, so they're not eating that much. So that you don't get that skinny overnight. So it suggests there's some scarcity of food going on, and they're not coming back with any huge haul. You know, what is that? A pheasant or a rabbit like thrown? That's about it. You know, so it's slim pickings. So he's suggesting winter's hard. There's suffering. through doing this, right? So he's giving us a complex image of winter. It's many things. Winter is hardship, winter is suffering, there's a shortage of food.
Are there people cooking over to the left?
Yeah, and over here there's some in the background, there's a fire. So there's
What are
some,
people,
so there's warmth. You got,
people wading in the water in the right-hand corner?
are they what?
Are they wading in the water?
No,
They look,
they're on the ice. It's ice.
oh, they are on the ice. That's
Yeah, it's
ice.
all
And
ice.
maybe, and maybe they're trying to ice fish.
That could be, or they're actually, if you zoom in on that, the one down here, this one's pulling the other person. It's not really ice
They're
fish.
playing.
Yeah. So there's this upper part. We're up on a ridge. So there's the hunters and the dogs returning, suggesting winter hardship. They've been out on the hunt. They haven't been too successful. Dogs are skinned. But over there in the background, there's the house and the fire. And are they cooking? So that suggests, there's warmth and there's life that goes on in the wintertime. Why are they cooking outside? I'm not sure. Maybe they're just there's some kind of food preparation that goes on. And then you drop down and then he likes to use trees. We've noticed that in the other one. Trees convey a sense of movement in his painting. So the trees take you right down, right? You just like walk you right down, and then the trees get smaller and smaller. Okay. So that's like you're on a sled going down. It's a pretty steep drop off. And then if you were to zoom in and when we look at that video, there's all this over here is saying something else about winter. This is ice. They're ice skating and they're having fun. They're playing games, right? They're playing like Dutch version of ice hockey. There may be a little dancing. And there's a woman here, actually can't see here, but she's carrying a kindling wood across this bridge, maybe on the way to this fire over here. So there's two sides to winter. At least he's given us that much. There's the hardship, scarcity, cold, bitter cold. But then there's a side that winter's fun. There's things you can do with ice skating and hockey on the ice that are just, it just so much reminds me of my childhood, because at the bottom of the street there was a woods and a hill, and then a large creek that would freeze over every winter. And on a weekend night, Friday night, Saturday night, everybody was out. Loads of people were out ice skating. You could sled down that hill onto the ice, and there was bonfires. And I have so many fond memories of that time. And anytime I see this painting or similar ones they did, it just reminds me of that. And it's
Where
like,
did you grow up, Joe?
in New Jersey and South Jersey. And it was in the 50s, and it's gone. That type of communal act. I don't know if people go to ice skating rinks now, or it doesn't get cold enough, but it just was my own experience of a village life like this.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I have two things I want to say. Maybe they're making meat over there where the fire's burning. That's my second thought. My first thought is a lot of people cooked outdoors because of fires starting in the house and kept the house on fire.
Yeah, they maybe had some. It depends on what they're cooking. If they had a pot over a fire, but if they had to do something large, they probably did it outside.
Maybe they were hoping the hunters came back with game.
Yeah, right, really.
Yeah, or the beer or something. All right. And then there's the bird. So look at this is this panoramic point of view. There's a name for this style of landscape. It's called the world view. And it was a big influence on later landscape painters right up through the 19th century, where it's like they're painting almost the whole world. It just goes on, and it's a bird's eye view. It encompasses so much, and even the birds here are important in the painting, because it's almost like the viewer feels like a bird, one of the birds, like from the perspective. Where are you? You're either up in a tree on top of a house, or you're up in the air with the birds soaring down. So
You said it was
Yes?
an important part of labor.
What's that?
Oh, the world view concept was an important part of which population?
Oh, it's a landscape. It's a subcategory of landscape painting.
Oh,
you get this broad, large, all-encompassing view. And the distance goes off, 20, 30 miles to the horizon line, that kind of thing. You see that for centuries. Go into the National Gallery and you'll see 19th century in DC, 19th century painters that have mastered that genre. So he's and it's and notice like he's in Holland. So look what he painted here. So this is partly imaginary. There's no mountains in Holland. It's all flat. And this, from what I read, he was very impressed by the Alps. He went to Italy, spent time.
Oh, okay.
And
And he's painting on wood?
yeah, wood panels. He painted. And actually, wood panels have more longevity than canvas. Canvas will over the centuries can tear and decompose. Wood panels have more stability. Although very thin wood panels, I read like I don't know, eighth of an inch or less than half an inch. So they're fragile for that reason. But yeah, so he was very impressed with the Alps, and so he had to put it in his painting.
Oh, that was cool.
Yeah. But all the white and the greens to suggest ice. And then again, it's the red, there's warmth, So those are cool colors, the greens and the gray greens and the earth colors. But the warmth, there's the warm colors here, the oranges, the reds, the dogs, so, and then there's all hints of the warm colors that just move down the painting here and get a little more subtle and subtle, So if you look at what he's doing with composition, with color, it's very masterly. Here's one of his etchings, beekeepers, right? Yeah. You can see he was highly skilled at etching. More of those. All right, this is what's the title there? Can you see it? This is a Bible scene, Massacre of the Innocents. So that's a Bible story. And a lot going on. You could zoom in on any area of this painting and there's a story being told. Very warm, lots of red in this painting and again, clusters of action. And again, the eye will move through a zigzag. It zigzags its way through the painting and this way and that way. And there's a kind of the center point here, the soldiers, who I guess are killing them. They're clustered in like this cluster of evil force, and all the other people have scattered about. Another of his winter scenes with this one primarily much more toned down, not so many warm colors, but people, the village people, peasants, having fun on the ice.
What is a bird trap?
A what?
Oh, a bird trap.
Spell it.
It said winter landscape with skaters and a bird trap.
Bird trap. Good
Trap.
Yeah,
And it was his most copied, his most copied painting.
Oh, really?
Smaller than many of his landscapes.
Here's the bird trap right here. See it? It's
No, I don't know what
bottom right of the painting near the main.
Yeah.
See it right here? It's like a piece of wood and propped up by a stick, right?
Yeah.
And so what happens is, I think there's a string attached to it. And I guess if a bird they want comes in there, I guess they drop the string and it traps the bird. I guess
You can actually see the string going up to one of the houses.
Oh yeah, so they can pull the string from a distance. Yeah. Yeah.
May I ask, how was the wood prepared to be painted on? Did they have to prepare this wood?
Yeah, they did.
What did they do?
Let me think. I have read that. See if I can remember it. You have to put a primer on, or some kind of a glue. I think they use like rabbit's glue, which would they use on canvas, but I think they also use that on wood. So the glue would make sure there's nothing coming up out of the wood over time, any oils or whatever. And then once you get that on, then you put like a gesso or a primer of white or whatever, some color as an undercoat of the paint, and then you just build it up from there. But you got to cover the wood with some.
And you said rabbit glue. What's rabbit?
Oh, rabbit, yeah, that would be the on canvases, and I think on wood would be the first layer. It's called a size, S-I-Z-E, and it just creates the bottom layer for the painting that you don't want anything seeping through the paint, and particularly oil. You don't want the oil seeping through the painting onto the canvas because it will rot the canvas. It'll deteriorate it with the oils. And so you need a barrier. It's basically a barrier between the ground, whatever it is you're painting on, the support. The support means what you're painting on. It could be wood, could be canvas. So you got to create a barrier to make sure it doesn't deteriorate with time. Okay. And so rabbit glue is one. They, I don't know, something to do with the guts and intestines of rabbit. They had a whole formula that created a sticky substance that could be painted over once it dried.
Wow.
Yeah. And now you just buy these pre-made substances if you want to do it yourself, artists. If I paint on board, I do just an acrylic, just plain clear or white acrylic, and it's a hard plastic, like it dries and it's fine. It'll protect any seepage come through from both ways. All right, so he did some of these. Looks like pottery paintings. And I don't know what the story is there. All right, let's look it up. Again, some of his religions paintings. This reminds me a bit of Hieronymus Bosch. Let's see. Probably there's very dense, right? Like Bosch, so much going on, and I'm kind of showing off his drawing skills, and but it doesn't relax the eye too much. There's so much activity, but it looks like heaven and hell, like the angels are wreaking their justice on the sinners here. Hieronymus Bosch thought he was influenced by Bosch. Here's a good peasant dance scene.
My smartphone went completely dead. So again, and so I had to wait till I got home to my computer. So I missed some of what you said. But who would buy these paintings, or were they commissioned, or did you say that?
Well, he had patrons, wealthy patrons. It was the middle class and merchant class, which is starting to develop back then. It peaked, like I said, with Rembrandt a century later, but it was just starting. So he had local patrons, and he painted in the city of Antwerp, which is in Belgium now. That's his home. He went to Italy for a while to study. I'm not sure how long he stayed there, a year or whatever. He came back and settled in Antwerp, and he never left Antwerp after that. So Antwerp merchants would be his people who would purchase them. I don't know how much these colors have faded, like the ground, the earth here. It looks very greenish. I don't know if those were his original colors. They could have faded over the years. Maybe more realistic.
Looks like some blue in the front.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah, a little bit. Yeah, they didn't use, if he had blue, it was not lapis lazuli. It was another inferior type of blue that doesn't, like the medieval painters use. It didn't pop out too much.
Well, didn't the church really control the blue? I remember you saying that. And they started charging huge amounts of money for it because they only wanted it for certain painters painting certain saints and church.
Virgin Mary, that was it.
Yeah.
And it was Titian who broke away from that. But for I guess the 1400s, 1500s, it's extremely expensive, and the church just got control. It was more expensive than gold, actually.
And the people probably didn't have blue clothes for the same reason.
I guess, I'm not sure. Well, blue dye, I don't know what they may have been using for. There was other ways to get blue, but the blue that we used in medieval paintings that wasn't lapis lazuli was just inferior. It faded rapidly. It wasn't a very strong, interesting, intense blue like the lapis lazuli. But there's this is a festival, a lot going on. There isn't any like one central person or it's like a mob scene. You just got to work your way around it and see all that. Yeah, go ahead.
It's the wedding dance.
Yeah, the wedding dance. Yeah.
It's a mob scene. Yeah, you do have to work your way around it or in it. So.
The white.
What's the best conversation?
The reds and the white pull your, in terms of color, pull the white head pieces and the woman, and then the reds will pull your eye through it to all the way to the back. But there is like it goes to the left and to the right, and a little bit of an opening in the middle, and then they join again in the back. They join again in the back. So interesting composition, but lots of movement. There's another
Ooh,
one.
love
Yeah,
that one. That's beautiful.
yeah.
Wow.
Very subdued tones, almost black and white, right? Browns, dull browns. But yeah.
Actually, what I saw in that was a lot of that green, the one just before. That's
This
an
one-
interesting combination. I haven't seen that so much. Whites and browns and green.
Yeah. Right.
Well, of course, the sky has got a
Very
lot of
good.
aqua blue,
Very
other
good,
kind of
yeah.
gradations of blue.
And that's all a suggestion of color. You know, color in wintertime, the color is gone, the flowers are gone, so everything is reduced to very browns and green.
Yeah, but I mean, just that gorgeous green lake. It's lovely.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And the greens in the foreground, in the
Right.
costumes of the people up at to have the census up standing in front of the building.
Would it have been snowing in Bethlehem? Bethlehem? I doubt it.
Well, yeah, he's supposed to call it the Census of Bethlehem, right? That's funny. Well, again, he's combining the Bible and Dutch landscape in a
Right.
stretching imagination.
We can't get too accurate here.
Yeah, right. What's the title of this one? Children's games. There's a lot going on in this painting.
Wow.
Yeah, and a lot of humor. And that's the other thing I haven't mentioned. If you zoom in, you see there's a lot of things he does that are poking fun at people or sarcastic or making this people's foibles. So there's that. So there's a lot of games going on. Some are cruel, some are not. So there's so many different stories and little clusters of actions that are going on here that you can zoom in on. And it's just so busy, village life. Time of year looks like, I don't know.
I
Sometimes
wonder how long it took him to do some of these.
I know, it's like,
So
yeah.
many-
There's so, I mean, to paint all these figures as accurately as he does,
Right.
and all the gestures. Look at all the gestures and movements, and that's not easy. I mean, because everyone's doing something that seems authentic, so they're not just stiff. They're not stiff. They're all in. He's like like it says, like a snapshot. So, and they get all the gestures working together and all the actions working together. That's a lot to do with his master.
It's like an early movie.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Yeah,
a great observation.
yeah.
Look at the depth on to the right of the canvas, whatever it is, the board,
Yeah.
going down the street. I
Yeah,
just
keeps
noticed
going, and
that.
everybody, and the
Fantastic.
figures get smaller and smaller and smaller. He's creating
So beautiful.
perspective by size, reducing the size.
Wow.
And again, it's a point of view. We're standing on the top floor of the building, looking down on this scene, or bird's eye view, if you will. But people rolling hoops. What's going on over here, bottom right? I don't know. It's like teenagers riding each other's backs, having fun, riding the barrel. Yeah.
Because of the screen size, I can't really tell, but there's a figure underneath the arches of that building in the middle, on the left-hand side. It looks like it's a priest. Does he have a whip in his hand or a scythe, or what is it?
Yeah, right. It almost looks like a medieval religious scene he incorporated, because this suggests the church, so it looks like something with religious stories going on. I can't tell exactly.
It's interesting he included that in children's
Yeah.
games.
Yeah, I know. Right.
Kind of the tongue-in-cheek game of being whipped. It's like,
Right.
oh God.
Well, they did that, self-inflicting pain. That was part of the things that the Catholics did to punish themselves, for their sins. So they would whip themselves, or maybe ask someone else to whip them. So it was voluntary.
It looks like he might be whipping the guy in front of him who's in the green.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. There's the darkest part of the painting right here. It looks like a church or something that they're going into. This whole building here could be some kind of a sacred building or church.
And then on the far left,
Yeah,
Close to where those trees are?
over here.
Are these ladies in big red hoop skirts?
Yeah, that looks that way. It looks like they're, I don't, it looks like that's their skirts, right? They're sitting down, on the grass. Looks like there's somebody swimming in the stream or the river there. Yeah. Or maybe there's some kind of picnic. Someone's starting to climb a tree. There's people in the window here hanging out, something, I'm not sure. Yeah. So there's all these little things to explore, all these actions and to explore. This is so characteristic of Bruegel. They're just chock full of actions.
Are these very large paintings?
Good question.
Because there's so much going on, and
Yeah,
as we're looking at them, the figures look so tiny.
I'm not sure the exact size. That's good. Good question though. I'm not sure how big these are.
Would they be destroying the church since this was the time when they were doing that?
I don't get that sense here that they're breaking into the church and knocking over statues. I don't get that. I think this seems to be just part of the whole village activity. That's okay. That was, I don't get there's violence going on in this.
Yeah, no.
There's a huge cluster of people here. What are they doing right here and there? Okay, let's look at one of the, what's this one?
Oh.
It's called The Triumph of Death, one of his symbolic paintings. Yeah, it's again.
Wow.
I know, very much surreal, Hieronymus Bosch. It makes you wonder, I think Salvador Dali must have been influenced, because you see some of these Dali, right? Look at some of these, look at these long, you see these in Dali paintings, these long, elongated figures. Yeah, I'm sure he was influenced by, I know he was influenced by Hieronymus Bosch. He must have been influenced by Bruegel too. Yeah, look at that. So, and look at a number of soldiers here. I guess all implied. I don't know what they're all being pushed into this, like a death machine or something, right? They're all getting ground up. It reminds me a little bit of in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna opens his mouth, and Arjuna sees millions of people going to their deaths inside the whole destruction inside Krishna's mouth, and it terrified him. And it's a bit like this is like an open mouth, and people are getting pushed into it. All right, let's look at a couple of videos here.
Oh dear.
Just looking at them makes me. We're looking at labels, hunters or hunters in snow. It's this wonderful panel painting from the Renaissance.
Can I stop for a second? Actually, someone asked me to use a microphone, and I forgot all about it. Is my voice okay? Can you hear me? Is the sound okay, everyone?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
From Flanders, made for merchants
Yes.
that had asked Bruegel to make.
And if everybody now could put their mic on mute, all right, mute your mic, so I can hear noises. Please mute your mic. Good.
6 panel paintings, which were study of the labors of the monks. This is an idea that goes back to manuscript illumination, back to the medieval period. And this is perhaps the very first time in the history of painting where that idea has been brought to this larger scale.
Each one of these paintings represents a different time of year. We're obviously looking at winter here, and we see some hunters returning from their hunt with their dogs, but they haven't got very much to show for their day out hunting.
If you look closely, you can see a rabbit just hanging off the back of one of the hunters, but it is a pretty meager catch, and it does give us a sense of the stresses of winter.
You can see the footprints that they're leaving in the snow, so there's this real sense of trudging through this deep snowy landscape.
And in the foreground, there is that sense of melancholy as well. Their backs are turned to us, the pack of dogs that follow, their heads are down. There's a sense of them being tired and unsuccessful. But as our eye moves down the hill and and it moves down pretty fast. There's almost no middle ground. All of a sudden, we're down in those icy ponds. Then we see a different side of winter. We see playfulness. And in fact, this painting is full of the activities of winter.
So we're not just looking at a lovely landscape, but a landscape that is given meaning by the activities of the people that inhabit it, by their daily routines.
In fact, that idea is an ancient one and comes from Virgil. Bruegel's patron may well have been thinking about Virgil when he commissioned this series, this notion of painting a landscape that is given meaning by the labors of the people within it. Although the image seems as if it is a moment in time, in fact, the painting is carefully composed. Our eye follows the hunters down the hill, which is given a wonderful visual rhythm by those trees. And then my eye wants to ride down to that frozen pond where we see a woman pulling somebody else on a little sleigh.
Yeah.
And then I want to go by those black crows, and under those arches, there's that lovely woman just above who's carrying perhaps some firewood. And then beyond that, we see lots of play taking place.
We do. We see people pulling each other on the ice, children playing and chasing each other, a man about to hit a ball with a stick on the ice, playing kind of ice hockey from the 16th century.
And then perhaps actually somebody who's fallen, whose hat has fallen off.
And this is really typical of Netherlandish painting, this idea of giving us a lot of visual information, a lot of things to look at, small little narratives, so that we can patiently discover more and more.
Think about the time that this is made. This is the Renaissance. And in Italy, it is an attempt at this moment to perfect, to isolate the most ideal moments. And it's so different from Northern painting, which is concerned with these almost literary narratives.
And every day, the mundane.
But it is still interested in finding meaning that comes from the multiplicity of human activities, no matter how prosaic. Our eye also can soar through the painting. And
Much like the birds
well,
that we see.
that's exactly what I was thinking. We have the birds who soar through this space, even into the very distant hills that are a reminder that Bruegel had actually made his way from Northern Europe across the Alps to Italy. But unlike some of the other Northerners who made that trip, he doesn't come back with the latest traditions of the Italian Renaissance painters. Instead, he seems to be caught in the landscape. Look at that beautiful Alpine vista that we have in the upper right. There's nothing like that in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that in Flanders.
Right, when Bruegel made his trip down to Italy, what he seems to have most been impressed with were the Alps. And so this is a good reminder that what we're looking at is not an actual view, for example, that Bruegel saw out his window, but a composed, partially imagined, composite landscape activated by these human figures.
The landscape feels frozen and harsh, but it's warmed by its human inhabitants.
This is a famous painting, the Peasant Wedding. It's a fantastic painting.
Art so often focuses on the lives of kings, of biblical figures, of saints and martyrs. But what about everyday people? What about most of us?
Well, that's exactly what we get to see thanks to Bruegel, who was known as the peasant painter. We're seeing a peasant wedding from the late 16th century.
There's so much to look at here. There are so many people crowded into this barn-like space. You can see huge walls of hay that are being stored in the background. And in front of that, a long table with, well, the wedding party.
This is a new type of painting. This is a genre painting, a scene of everyday life. And this is a subject that begins to be painted in the 16th century because the Protestant Reformation has happened.
So the artist's traditional patron, the church and people buying art for the church, has disappeared. And so now the artists are looking for different subjects, and we have the birth of landscape painting, a genre. We see still life beginning to develop, this new array of options, of possibilities. But of course, patronage is still coming from the wealthy. This is a culture that was based on trade and manufacturing. It would have been those that had made a significant amount of money that would have then gone to artists and said, paint me a painting about our world.
So there was something really appealing about a monumental painting of peasants celebrating life, enjoying each other's company, and celebrating a wedding.
You used the word monumental a moment ago, and that's such a perfect word for this painting. Bruegel paints in a style that feels monumental. The figures are solid. They seem like the salt of the earth. Everything about this painting has a feeling of warm roughness.
it's important to think about that in relationship to the culture of Antwerp and Brussels, where Bruegel worked. Those were big cities that, as you said, were really wealthy. But what Bruegel is showing us here, and what his patrons wanted to see, was a much simpler life.
Let's do exactly what the artist is inviting us to do. Let's walk in.
There's a lot of feasting and drinking, a lot of drinking especially. We see the figure on the lower left who's pouring out the drink that's being enjoyed.
My guess is that's beer. This is Flanders, what is now Belgium, and they make great beer. And it makes sense because that's a drink made from grain, the very material that is so much a part of the life of these peasants. They're growing it, they're harvesting it, and here they're participating in a wedding on the thrashing floor. My eye first goes to that tray that's being carried by those two waiters when they seem to be bringing in some sort of porridge or pudding in these earthenware bowls. If you look a little bit past that, you can see a man in a red cap who's picking up those bowls and seems to be passing them down the table.
Carelessly, because one looks like the food is about to slip out of the bowl.
True. We might look under his hand and see that there's a knife, there's a cutting board, there's a loaf of bread. And then we might go to the right, and there we see, seated in a high-backed chair, the notary, the legal observer of the wedding. To his left, we can see a Franciscan speaking to a man who's elegantly dressed and really stands out. That would probably be the landowner, the noble whose land all of these peasants work.
And the artist is really drawing our attention to the star of the wedding, the star of any wedding, the bride, who forms the top of a pyramid between those two figures in the foreground that you were describing. And she sits in front of a green cloth. This was the tradition, below a crown, and also wearing a crown. And she sits very modestly and demurely, not partaking and eating and drinking, all part of the way peasants celebrated weddings in the 16th century.
Scholars have done research and determined that Bruegel is quite accurate in his representation. He's trying to get right how these rituals were enacted. And so the idea that the bride would stay very passive with her hands folded, not eating, not speaking, under that crown made of paper.
Not jewels.
Definitely not jewels, is apparently quite accurate. And so it is this glimpse, not only for us now in a later era, but even for the city patrons.
And when we think about that kind of anthropologist view, maybe sometimes we think about a view that's very distant, but I don't feel that with Bruegel. I feel a sense of sympathy with these figures, a sense of shared humanity. And I think that's what makes him a great painter, is that we look at the faces and they feel like people we might know or recognize.
I really love the lower left corner of the painting. This little boy whose face is almost completely obscured by his hat. Although he's been dressed up, he's got that wonderful peacock feather in his cap, and he's been making sure that he doesn't miss any drop of that pudding.
And then that figure who pours the beer is very graceful in his movements.
Beautifully foreshortened rendering of the face. This is almost drawing as well as painting. All the way at the far end of the table, there's another lovely little vignette that shows a woman with a small child seated next to her who's happily eating. And she seems to be looking up, holding her stein, saying, "Would you fill this up for me?
Would you mind getting me something else to drink?" And there's also the figure who's playing the bagpipes, who's watching the food come in. It's just a really lovely glimpse into life in the 16th century, painted with a sense of warmth and generosity.
We can inhabit this world with them in just a wonderfully intimate way.
All right. Any comments about anything to do with Bruegel? There's a couple websites that have his paintings, and from what I read, there's only 40 of his paintings survive that that they're certain about, and 61 of his drawings. So it's not a large body of work. So there's a couple websites that you can see his collected works that we still have.
Joe,
But,
next
yeah.
next time you play the video, can you turn their sound up? I can hear you, but not the.
Well, it's all controlled by one volume control on me. On my.
Oh, and yeah, I've got mine way up high, so and I can hardly hear it.
Sorry. Okay. I'll have to turn up.
Yeah, I'm the same with Marge. I couldn't hear it very well either. I had to really strain and I missed stuff.
Okay, so when I play a video, I'll up the volume more. Okay, I didn't know that. Thanks for telling me. I'm tempted. There's another one, but I'm just aware of time because there's a really good documentary I have on Vermeer. It's really excellent, and it shows a lot of his paintings, his composition, what he's doing, and it's really a great way to step into Bruegel. But it's 2:56, and it's almost an hour, so Is it okay just to transition into him now? There's more we could say about Bruegel. We could more of his paintings, but is that okay? But you get the sense, the genre paintings, and that were, again, I like what he said. His paintings are treating peasants as worthy people, with compassion, with not looking down like they're on them. And he was probably the first person, one of the first artists to really do that. And I know Van Gogh was very influenced by him. And you see Van Gogh's early paintings of peasants in the field, and Van Gogh's writings, he glorifies the peasant life. They're the real people, the real salt of the earth, etc. So, and yeah. All right. If you get a chance, look at, I'll just recommend this, The Tower of Babel that Bruegel did. And there's a short video on this. You could look at that on your own. And it's a really interesting painting. It's very symbolic. And it just shows that he had this whole other imaginary, fantastic style that he could go into that's very different than the genre painting. So Vermeer. So Vermeer lived after Bruegel. Okay, Vermeer was pretty much a contemporary of Rembrandt. He 1632 to 1675, and he lived in the city of Delft, D-E-L-F-T, in Holland, and pretty much didn't go anywhere his whole life. He didn't go to Italy. He just studied there and did an apprenticeship. Not much is known about his early life. There's a lot of question marks. But what is known is his father, Vermeer's father, was an art dealer, and also his father bought an inn. And so when his father died, he inherited the business, which was twofold: dealing in art and running this inn. And
Frozen, Joe. No,
pardon?
now you're not. Sorry.
Okay.
I thought you were frozen. I don't know.
So he inherited this inn, and then he got married to a Catholic. He was Protestant. He got married to a Catholic woman, Katerina. I forget her last name. Was wealthy, or at least her parents were wealthy, and I think her father was dead at the time. But her Vermeer's mother-in-law was very wealthy, and he moved in to. She had a large house. And so the couple moved into her house. And so, and the mother-in-law insisted that in order to marry her daughter, he had to convert to Catholicism. And he did that. So apparently sincerely, but I don't know, I don't know if it's such a great idea to live in your mother-in-law's house. I wouldn't necessarily want to do it, but he did that. And all the paintings you see was, it's like, as opposed to Bruegel with these outdoor landscapes, huge panoramas. He's painting pretty much most of his paintings were people inside his room up on the second floor. All right? And he made that one room universal. It's incredible what he did. He didn't, there's probably only, they think maybe he did like 60 or 70 paintings in his life. Well, no wonder he had 15 children. And 4 of whom died very early. So, but 11 kids. So between raising 11 children, running this inn, keeping the art paint, the dealing in art business, I don't know how I had any time to paint. Really. So it's no wonder he did so few of them. But the ones he did are incredible jewels and some of the greatest paintings in the West that have ever been done. He had a sad ending, similar to Rembrandt, although it happened a lot faster. Rembrandt had the slow fade out with bankruptcy and having to live in more or less poverty for him. Whereas what happened to Vermeer is that he was sticking along and selling paintings. He had a patron, and he had the money to buy lapis lazuli. You see this, he loved that blue. And it's like these paintings just doing them must have cost a fortune. Like I said, lapis lazuli was more expensive than gold back then. but his patron was supplying all that, a wealthy patron. And then there was a war with Spain and England, and they cut off trade, they cut off the access, and so the economy crashed. And he had just taken out a big loan, and then the economy crashed, and he's in debt, and he's not making any money. He's not selling any paintings. Nobody's buying any paintings. And then he got sick, and according to his wife, it's like he died within 2 days of getting sick, which is amazing. He just checked out. It's like, and left her with this debt and responsibility raising, I think, 11 children. And back then, when the debt collectors moved in, they took everything, and she had to fight to keep some of the paintings and sell some of them just to survive. So she struggled. I don't know all the details of how she did after that, but it was a struggle. So yeah, so it was a quick exit for him. And how old was he? Probably, it looks like he was 43 when he died. So he about the same age as Bruegel. His paintings, I've talked about how the theme of the divine, the central theme of spirituality and art, and how to paint that, and it's been done in so many various ways. And when you look at his paintings, that there is a certain, he's taken simple actions, that a milkmaid pouring milk into a jar, and he's made it into this timeless, eternal moment, like a Buddhist mindfulness, the present moment. He's captured the beauty, the spirituality, the divine dimensions of the present moment in his paintings, and they're magical in that sense. And nobody has ever been able to do it like he did. There is a mystical, magical essence to his paintings that are beyond any rational explanation to explain them. And you can look at all his techniques, and there's something else that just transcends. And it's like, if you're in a really deep spiritual state of mindfulness, you meditating, and you're in the present moment, and you open your eyes, the world seems different. It's like you're not looking at the world through your ego, you're looking at it through your heart or through the eyes of your soul. And it's almost like that's what he's capturing. It's like every little action, these moments, they have a lot of psychological depth, but they radiate with like the eternal presence, and that's what's magical about him. And I think this documentary, they do a good job of explaining that. And after he died, he was known in the city, but not in Delft. Not many people knew about him. Even when he was alive, he sold his paintings locally. And then when he died, that was it. He just went into obscurity for centuries. It wasn't until the middle of the 19th century that a French art critic rediscovered him and made it its life passion to locate his paintings and wherever he could and start writing about them. And then now, gradually he's recognized as one of the greatest masters of Western painting ever. But he just laid there in obscurity for 300 years almost. So interesting that. Okay, so I'll look at one or two paintings, and then we'll look at the documentary. I think we can squeeze it all in.
And remember to turn the volume up, please.
Oh,
And
yeah.
even yours could go up a little bit. Thank
Okay,
you.
so it's 304. I'm just going to jump into the documentary. There are 36 of his paintings that are.
How much do they go for these days?
People don't sell them. They're too valuable. But the last one I know of sold for 35 million, but that was years ago. If any one of his paintings went up for sale, it could go for 100 million today. But no one wants to sell it because there's so few, Actually, there's only, it says, I wrote down here, 50 paintings that they know of, but only 34 have survived, 34 to 36. That's it. So if you own a Vermeer, you don't want to sell it, yeah. And they're small. So that was that Jill that asked what size. His paintings are small, 18 by 16 or 18 by 24 or something like that. The other thing that's interesting before I go is it looks like he used a primitive form of camera obscura. Have you ever heard of that? The camera obscura. It's a way of reflecting an image onto a mirror in a box and it would appear upside down. And he would paint from that. That's pretty sure he's did that. And David Hockney, the British painter, did a whole film on researched his use of the, and other painters have in that time period were using the camera obscura. And you can tell, there's a way to tell that that's what they were doing. And some say, they're cheating, you know, it's like they're working from a photograph. Well, I don't know. But that's interesting. Although when the debt collectors came in, they made a list of all his possessions, and there was no camera obscura. So this is listed in his possessions there after he died. So, but all the evidence points that some of his paintings he was using the camera obscura, which gave him a close-up view in the mirror of the figure or the room inside the room.
Maybe the debt collectors didn't know what they were looking at.
Yeah, that could be. I don't know. Or
Jack,
maybe it was like they didn't want to painters didn't want others to know they were doing it. It was a secret because they would be criticized. Oh, you're not, you know, you're cheating. So maybe he did have it, but it was hidden, or he got rid of it. I don't know, but there is a documentary on YouTube, the David Hockney one, that goes into detail about the use of the camera obscura, not just by Vermeer, but by other painters at the time. It's really fascinating. And there's another device similar, I forget the name of it offhand, that they use.
Jack has a question and wondering how he signed his paintings.
How did Vermeer sign his paintings?
Yeah, any special way? He just painted his name?
Good question. I don't know. I'm not sure that. I think actually, there are, I think I remember reading, there's some that have a very clear signature. Yeah, others not so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's watch this. It's really a good documentary. And we get into you'll see a lot of paintings, you'll see his compositional style, his technique, and just the beautiful essence of the paintings. And if you have a problem with hearing it, I can put up the volume more. Let me know.
Johannes Vermeer was a painter of light. He lived and worked in Delft, in the heart of the Netherlands. But little else is known about this artist. The names of his masters, the nature of his training, the period of his apprenticeship all remain mysteries. He left no letters, sketches, or drawings. We know only of his genius. His paintings have intrigued and fascinated viewers for centuries. The themes he chose to paint were those he encountered in daily life. A girl reading a letter in the center of the sunlit room. A figure at work. A woman pouring milk. A girl in a red hat, her lips parted, her eyes lit with expectation, looking at us. What is it that draws us in? Is it the poetry and power of the images, the use of reflected light, the saturation of color, the softness and yet brilliance of the image, or the sense of timelessness, its mystery and meaning? The celebration of ordinary tasks in daily life filled with quiet contemplation. The frozen moment in time, its intimacy and mood. A room filled with inner thoughts. Or is it simply the virtuosity of an extraordinary craftsman? What is it that makes a Vermeer a Vermeer?
There's a greater sense of light, I think, in Vermeer's painting than there is in anybody else's. And the light bathes the room. It lights on the figures. The figures seem to glow. Some of them seem to have a light almost within themselves. And there is this brilliant, brilliant use of light that nearly always comes through a window, which is on one side of the scene. One of the fascinating things I noticed is that you never see the outside. You never see a tree through the window. You only see the light coming through. But it is this light that is incredible. His use of this light playing on the various textures that he wants to portray, which have all their different meanings.
The supreme quality of Vermeer's light is the daylight effect. The clear daylight effect is
Can
extraordinary.
you turn it up, Joe?
Daylight permeates his shadows.
Is that better?
And you see that so beautifully in the Milkmaid.
Is that better?
As you look into that,
Not much.
Yes.
there's a wonderful still life of some kitchen implements, a brass pot and a wicker basket.
I can't go any
You're
louder.
seeing the whole thing, but you know it is in shadow.
That's better,
One of the
thank
most
you.
beautiful things in the picture is the wall and back of her. And the gradations of light with the intense light on the right side of the picture. And those gradations go from the most intense light to a darker light. But the shadows are transparent. There's always this clarity of form. The forms are never lost. There's another thing that's exciting about this picture. It begins to have a kind of pointillism. And if you look down at the loaves of bread, you got those solid forms, but in them he has these touches of light. He's broken his forms with these little points of light. And he uses that so effectively, and he uses it beautifully in the view of Delft. Those boats, which are in the lower right-hand corner there, those real little touches of light, which means that the light bounces onto these dark forms. And it's wondrous to behold.
The Woman of the Balance is one of those supreme examples of Vermeer as an artist. Light coming in through the window gently illuminates the whole interior. It's a sort of a soft, deep, rich light. But it's wonderful to watch it happen, wonderful to watch it evolve. And Vermeer gives you the sense of light spilling across the interior of that space. It passes by that orange curtain. You can see how the light goes from behind that curtain, hits the wall directly, the gray of the wall, and then it passes through the thickest part of the curtain, and it's a deep, dark shadow at that point. And then as it hits the edge of the curtain, it creates a golden glow that links together the gray of the wall and the deepest part of the shadow as it comes into the room. And then the light passes down, illuminating the table and the gold and the pearls on the table, coming across, caught by the edge of the table, and then your eye is drawn by her hand as it rests on the table, and you're brought back up to see her face, this wonderful, quiet, gentle face with her downcast eyes as she looks down at the balances she holds in her hand. Light draws you in and encompasses the full scope of the painting.
Harnessing light is central to the power of Vermeer. He transformed paint into light in the most brilliant and mesmerizing way.
He seduces us very quickly, Vermeer does. There's a magical quality to his work, beautiful, it's simple. But that's very deceptive. He's concentrating all the time. He adjusts reality. If you look at the art of painting, there's an artist at an easel, we see him from the back, and he's painting a woman, and she really represents history. And there's a map in the background, and the foreground is set so beautifully with the great carpet and a wonderful chandelier. All those details are ravishing. But where is the right leg of the easel? If you follow it down, you see the top of it, and you come down, and you see the artist is seated on a stool, and his foot is forward, but there's no leg of the easel. So where's that leg? If you look in that area where his leg is forward, and there are the two legs of the stool, if the leg of the easel came down there, it would confound that whole area. So he's either hidden it behind those two legs of the stool, or he's eliminated it completely. And if there's ever proof that Vermeer is not an ape of nature, he just doesn't paint what he sees, he makes adjustments. His pictures are so calculated, carefully. You don't see the calculation, but I assure you, he has calculated his effects. He's concentrated. There's tremendous intelligence at work here, artistic intelligence.
Vermeer designs his paintings so brilliantly, so carefully, that every part of the painting, every drop of paint, every line, every nuance of color has a deliberate meaning. A meaning in the composition, a meaning in the poetry, part of the story, whatever it is, everything has a meaning.
One of the most wonderful examples is the woman in blue reading a letter. It's this single figure who's standing in the corner of the room, and she's holding this letter, and you can see the kind of emotional intensity of her experience, because just the way she clasps her arms by her side. But Vermeer locks that gesture into space by placing those hands right over the very strong horizontal bar that's the bottom of the map that hangs on the wall behind her. So this horizontal bar at the bottom creates this tense concentration on those hands. So the result is that you feel nothing can move. Light also enters into this equation. While there are all these beautiful shadows and subtle shadow effects throughout the painting, she casts no shadow. By not casting a shadow, he somehow separates her out from time. The sense of passage of time that one senses with shadows, the moving of shadows, doesn't exist with her. So it enhances that whole sense of permanence. It's very hard with Vermeer to separate one thing from another because they're all so interwoven and interlocked. And the woman holding a balance, another example, it looks as though she will never move. It's in large part created by the gesture of the hand holding the balance, because that hand is locked in space by being juxtaposed over the vertical and horizontal elements of the frame. The little finger is extended horizontally, it just holds that hand in space. And then Vermeer reinforces that visual juxtaposition with a perspective. He will follow the perspective lines, go right back to that finger, that extended finger. The perspective of the table, of the mirror on the wall in front of her, all receded to that one point. So that vanishing point reinforces the importance of that gesture. And it's very interesting in Vermeer all the way through his career to see how he uses perspective, where he places the vanishing point, because the vanishing point tells us where he wants the eye to go.
An explanation of everything having a really serious part of the composition is in the woman with the balance. When I first examined that painting before the cleaning, the frame of the Last Judgment lying behind the woman was entirely black. In the X-radiograph, you could see the frame on the right side of the painting, behind the woman's head, had two light lines coming down. These light lines show that there was a density there, a dense material which could have been white lead or lead tin yellow. Further examination showed that this frame had been overpainted by somebody, not by Vermeer, very much later, and that two gold lines, actually they were bright yellow, had been painted out and painted with a dark gray. When that overpaint was removed, the composition came to life, because you got on the right-hand side two gold lines, you got on the left-hand side the light coming in and the gold yellow curtain, and right in the center is the gold little bit of her dress. And there are these three very, very important points, creating the strength of this composition with her holding the balance. Without the gold lines of the frame behind, the composition was just failing. It just didn't have the tension and the meaning that it now has. And that is a very good example of how every little thing in Vermeer's, every little point, every little mark has a meaning and has a purpose. Nothing is left to chance.
Vermeer's masterwork, The Music Lesson, clearly shows that nothing is left to chance. On the far side of a sunlit room, a woman stands playing a virginal. A man in elegant dress watches her and listens intently. Both figures are quiet, as though the music were measured and restrained. This is one of the most refined of Vermeer's works. He carefully calculated every aspect of its composition. The figures, the musical instruments, the mirror, table, tile patches, and chairs, however realistically presented, are conceived as interlocking patterns of color and shape. Vermeer's placement of the vanishing point creates a dynamic and clear focus. It falls on the sunlit sleeve of the woman. A halo of reflected light and color emphasizes its importance. We can actually see the hole in the canvas left by the pen Vermeer used to construct the perspective of the painting. The power of this work grows out of Vermeer's use of linear perspective. The sharply receding wall on the left, coupled with the pronounced orthogonals of the window frame, leads the eye quickly to the woman. She becomes the fulcrum around which the painting revolves. Vermeer further compresses the space by filling the right side of the scene with a large tapestry-covered table. The angle of its receding edge transports us quickly back to the vanishing point. The floor also plays a significant role in the perspective construction. Its strong diagonal pattern leads us directly to the woman. The interlocking series of rectangular shapes surrounding the woman adds visual emphasis to her importance. Vermeer creates a strong vertical focus by placing the mirror directly above the lid of the virginal, so that the bottom edge of its frame is overlapped by the top edge of the lid. By including the woman's reflection in the mirror, he underscores her significance within the painting. The placement of the man and his relationship to the woman was of concern to Vermeer. Infrared analysis reveals that he first painted the man further forward and leaning more toward the woman. She likewise had a more active stance, her head twisted back in his direction. Vermeer subsequently altered the figures. The woman now stands directly facing the virginal. Seen from behind, her face is hidden from the viewer, but her image in the mirror was left as originally painted. He moved the man slightly, placing him in a more upright position. These adjustments were subtle but crucial. Vermeer transformed the figures from active poses to statuesque ones, emphasizing the permanence of their relationship. The effect brings them into harmony with the carefully ordered space. Vermeer uses color to strengthen the focus. The yellow-white of the woman's blouse, the golden color of the virginal, and matching reflected light on the back wall highlight the figures. The red of the woman's skirt, and Vermeer's selective use of black on the mirror, the virginal, the clothing of the two figures, and the pattern of the floor help lock our eye into place. The combination of overall contrasting colors, patterns, and shapes create major and minor accents focused on the theme of the painting. Vermeer preserves the privacy of the couple by creating an intimate space through the arrangement of objects on the right. The strategic placement of the chairs and the bass viol on the floor lock the couple into the background, protecting their private communication and separating them from us. The forward position of the table and the placement of the painting on the back wall reinforce their intimate space. By placing a chair directly between the table and the vanishing point, Vermeer interrupts the perspective line, slowing down our immediate access to the couple. We are outside, looking in. The white, elegantly proportioned picture sitting on the table is central to the composition of the painting. Its form echoes the curve of the gentleman's arm, and its color helps to link the foreground to the background. The purity of this form gives it an almost sacramental character, symbolically reinforcing the theme of comfort and harmony provided by love. The mirror is one of Vermeer's primary creative tools. Using the mirror, Vermeer allows us to look down on the woman, the carpeted table, and the tiled floor of the room. The sensitivity with which he has rendered the reflection is remarkable. He set it back into the mirror rather than placing it on the surface by painting the forms softer and smaller, and by depicting the distorted reflections along the mirror's beveled edge. Vermeer uses the mirror to give us another viewpoint of the woman, revealing her most inner thoughts. By leaving the woman's original position in the mirror, gazing at the man, he suspends that psychological moment forever. It is this poetic image in the mirror that draws us emotionally into the heart of the painting. Vermeer manipulated the angle of the mirror for that purpose. Here we see the tilt of the mirror as he painted it. But in order to actually see the scene the mirror reflects, it would have to be drastically tilted by more than 30 degrees. Vermeer manipulated reality to intensify the psychological power of the painting. Understanding the potential of light is a primary aspect of Vermeer's genius. Here we see the room as it most likely would have been lit, given the clues the painting provides. Vermeer then selectively manipulates the light to strengthen the focus. He eliminated the shadows that should exist on the back wall to create an evenly illuminated white surface, providing a backdrop to emphasize the silhouettes of the figures. While Vermeer drastically reduced the shadow at the top of the virginal to allow the upper wall to be gently bathed in light, he darkened the shadow at the base of the window and distorted its angle on the wall. These two divergent shadows hold the virginal in place, the upper shadow leading the eye to the corner of the lid, and the lower shadow drawing our eye to where the leg meets the floor. Vermeer manipulated the shadows beneath the virginal by placing them closer to each other than they would really be, giving them greater substance and emphasizing the silhouetted shapes of the legs. He eliminated the shadow of the virginal's body against the rear wall in order to reinforce this effect. Vermeer completes this masterpiece by inserting his own presence. Showing the reflection of his easel in the top of the mirror, he reminds us that the artist is clearly present and in complete control. He is the master of what we see.
The Little Street is one incredible painting. It's really the one I would most like to have at home. It's one of these paintings that somehow brings you back to your childhood, makes you remember what it was like to be a kid, to look out across the way and see life going on just like it always had gone on. You'd see the woman sitting there doing a little thing. You see the kids playing on the street. You see the little maid in the back. They've been there time after time after time. You know, something very comforting about this world. It's a very contained world. It's this view of a street, but it's what's interesting is you don't feel like you need to go left or right. You're very happy right there. You're very happy. You don't want to go anyplace else. Vermeer somehow has created a sense of a street, and you don't want to walk down it. You just want to stay and look at this little world that he's given you. And one of the magical things, one of the reasons that that happens is because of that red shutter. That red shutter says, stop. That red shutter says, you've gone far enough. You don't have to go any further. So that red shutter is really important to blocking, limiting, to giving that sense of comfort in that world he's created. To the left of the door, you see that there's not nearly enough space for the shutters on the two windows to the left to completely open. So Vermeer has actually adjusted the architecture of the building, widened the space between the window on the far right and the door to allow that shutter to open flat, because he needed that red there. He knew he needed that red flat against the wall in order to complete that composition. So there's a wonderful example of color being used for compositional purposes.
He's a colorist from the word go. From the very beginning, he's a great colorist. And what changes in this color is from a warm tonality, from reds and yellows to the yellow and blue, to the cool. And then the silvery quality of his light. And I don't think you divorce the light from the color. It's all of a piece. He can get the sheen and the texture in a magical way. Vermeer does this. You paint satin, it really looks like satin, crisp. You can almost hear it. In the pile of a rug, or the bread, the crustiness of a bread, the color is doing that. Or the water in the view of Delft, the viscous water. fabulous, or the color of the clouds. And mind you, that fault in the view of Delft, that sky, is just unbelievable. You know, you say that Vermeer copies nature. Nonsense. Those clouds, he organized those clouds. Clouds aren't that way. Clouds don't stand still for a landscape painter. He has to figure out, how am I going to arrange them? And he keeps them horizontal. So the sense of the great vault, and then of the heavens, and it goes back to the horizon. And he's doing that all with color.
His color is intense. He can use one color next door to another with the most brilliant intensity. There's a great example in The Girl with the Red Hat, where she is wearing this beautiful blue costume. And the highlights, instead of being lighter blue, which is what you would expect, are yellow, which is opposite to blue, and therefore creates this shimmer. And this nobody else does this. It is absolutely extraordinary. And that painting is a brilliant display of color. She's sitting against this rich woven tapestry, marvelous interweaving of these shapes, all of which are brilliantly placed. Not one has a little thing out of place. They all play a part in getting this fabulous sense of this moment, of this girl turning towards you, catching the light on her face and in her hat. And it's a brilliant, brilliant piece of observation and translation of that into this painting.
When you're able to hold the girl with the red hat in your hands, that is a very special feeling. And in doing that, you really sense the artist at work. There's a whole different relationship that you have at that time. Little things that are hard to pick up in the gallery. For example, Vermeer gives this radiance of her vision with a little turquoise highlight that he puts in her eye, and this wonderful pink highlight in the mouth. The little accents like that that just make it come alive and have this kind of vivid quality. Vermeer works in glazes, very thin glazes, and the blues in particular are very thinly painted. He uses natural ultramarine, which is a wonderful, pure pigment. He prepared that area of the blue robe with a reddish-brown underpainting, and that gives a certain warmth to the blue. So when he paints it very thinly, you have this warm glow that comes to the background. So it's not just a cool blue, it has this inner warmth that ties it into the red of the hat and the orange of the cheeks, and the sort of the whole humanity of the image comes across through that means. And he uses his material and his techniques to enhance the emotional and psychological qualities of his work.
The Girl with the Red Hat is a sensuous painting. It is intimate and immediate. She communicates directly with us. Vermeer's use of color drives the emotional power of this painting. He sets the figure against the muted tones of a tapestry, concentrating color on the flame red of her hat and the lushness of her blue robe. Vermeer established an ochre base for the background of the painting. The soft tones of the tapestry elegantly emerge from that color. The lion head finials define the foreground and place the figure in space. Quick, strong strokes suggest the basic contours and structure of the heads. Using reddish-brown color for the base of the robe, Vermeer covered it with deep blue to establish its form. The brown bleeds through, and the combination of colors creates an extraordinary sense of warmth. He applied a delicate blue glaze to define the folds of the fabric. His use of thinly painted glazes creates depth, and the addition of ice blue highlights provides a shimmering quality. The face is established first in shadow. Vermeer used an opaque, deep red-orange paint as the underground for the hat. The red is an intensely warm and active color. It heightens the immediacy of the girl's gaze. A succession of semi-transparent strokes of light red and orange creates the feathery appearance of the hat. Vermeer demonstrates his sensitivity to the effects of reflected light by placing a dark purple hue on the underside of the hat. He subtly casts an orange-red reflection across the girl's face to accentuate the effect the red has on the viewer. He then uses green, the complementary color of red, to create the shadows on the face, enhancing both colors. Vermeer paints the cravat in a brilliant white. After laying the white down, he scraped away some of the paint to create definition. The white in the center of the composition cradles the face and focuses attention on her expression. Vermeer draws upon the power of light to increase the intensity of the color and to animate the painting, adding soft and shimmering highlights that crystallize the form of the finials, yellow highlights to enhance the blue of the robe and accentuate the quality of its color, delicate strokes finishing the texture and lushness of her hat, and highlights on the earring, nose, and lips to bring the face to life. His crowning touches are the placement of the pink on her lips and the turquoise in her eye. Vermeer's extraordinary use of color encourages a dialogue between the viewer and the girl and enhances the sense of poetry that flows throughout his paintings.
Vermeer was trying to emulate effects that he would have seen in an optical device called a camera obscura. Some of those qualities of this immediacy of looking out of this more momentary character of this painting may, in fact, be partially explained by the inspiration of the camera obscura. Now, he didn't really paint from a camera obscura. He certainly didn't copy the camera obscura, but it was a way of seeing, it was a way of enriching the way he saw that he then would apply and create and adapt in paintings such as this.
Camera obscura means darkened chamber. Its images were seen as magical in the 17th century, often described as nature's paintings. Its process is simple. When the camera faces an image on the outside, rays of light enter into the darkened chamber through a convex lens on the front of the box, projecting an inverted and reversed image on the surface of the glass viewing window at the back of the camera. The image contains optical effects, such as diffused or soft highlights. This is an actual black and white image of a lion head finial as seen through a camera obscura. The impact of this optical effect can clearly be seen when we place it next to Vermeer's painted finial and the girl with the red hat.
Those finials are a marvelous example of what you will see from a camera obscura. They're slightly out of focus in a way, and yet he's managed that light on them in the most brilliant way. The highlights are made by building up layers of paint, starting with an opaque layer, then building translucent layers, one on top of another, and finishing with little spots of bright white light. And those spots of bright white light are intense. And in fact, they remind me of the pearls that you see so often in Vermeer's paintings, where he does exactly the same thing, where he puts this circle of translucent white paint, grayish white paint, to create the roundness of the pearl, then this little blob of white paint in the center, which creates the light. It's exactly the same way that he paints the finials. It's quite extraordinary.
I think the most magical moment, perhaps in all of Vermeer's work, is in The Lace Maker. What a wonderful painting. And you have this woman, this intent woman who's busy with her activity of lace making. In the foreground, you have this thread spilling out of this cushion, totally diffused. I mean, you cannot make out what these are. This incredible, unfocused quality of these threads. It's amazing. And that is such a wonderful example of what one would see in a camera obscura focused closely on an individual. You focus the image on the face of the individual, and the foreground then gets entirely out of focus.
With Vermeer, there's this marvelous softness where outlines are soft. Every layer flows into one another. And so you get this fabulous sense, this poetic sense of light and movement, whether it be on a tabletop, whether it be on a wall, whether it be on a person's face. Everything is very, very soft and flowing from one layer into another. There are no hard edges. To look at a Vermeer through a microscope is an extraordinary experience because you see all this flowing, all these soft, soft edges. You wonder whether you're looking at the edge of the finger or something else when you're looking at a woman's hand. So soft are they. And he achieved this by painting wet in wet. Now, this is very simple. He would put down one layer, let's say, of opaque paint. While it was still wet, he would put another layer on top. And because the underlying layer was still wet, they would meld together, soften together. The edges would just blur a little bit. And there would be this flowing of these edges. So if you have a number of layers, one on top of the other doing this, this is creating this extraordinary sense of atmosphere, diffusion of light, this marvelous feeling of the form without having to describe every little fine detail. And a very good example of this is the little street in Delft, the house which has this facade of a brick wall, where if you look at it, you think that every little brick has been painted very distinctly. Absolutely not. When you look at it, it's a texture which gives you the sense of all this brickwork, not every little brick. And so he's creating this movement throughout the whole surface of the painting by this technique of painting wet in wet. It's quite ingenious.
There's illusion of texture in Vermeer's work. The most extraordinary textual effects are probably in the view of Delft. And I think the view of Delft is really amazing because there's this view of this city seen from across the waterway and across the harbor. And yet it seems so immediate, so real. There's something so intense about that view that it just comes out at you. And it's color, it's light, but it's really texture that is at the core of that. And he does lots of different things to create this effect in this painting. One of the amazing things, if you look at the roof lines, the different types of roofs, the orange tower roofs on the left, for example, have a kind of a bumpy character that he creates by having a sand layer mixed with lead white underneath the paint. So it's a lumpy base specific to that area. So he very consciously wanted to create the effect of texture three-dimensionally. And then he puts on it the orange and little highlights on top, little dots on top of it. And then when it comes to the boats, this wonderful feeling of light flickering off the water onto the sides of the boats that he does without any three-dimensional texture, but with all his handling of paint with these various diffuse layers, these little circles, these diffuse highlights, and then opaque highlights on top of it. Very interweaving of thin and thick and thin and thick. It's different in different parts of the painting, but it's all to serve a certain effect. It's really interesting to photograph it from here because everything always seems out of focus. It's one of these strangest things. And even restorers have been bothered by this. And this painting, The Woman Writing Letters, is a wonderful example where when we brought it into restoration, the arm was in fact quite precise in definition. And we discovered that in fact the restorer had made a contour line along that arm to make it defined in space, sort of losing the whole quality of light that Vermeer is creating.
That is so unlike Vermeer. Vermeer did not create hard edges. They were all soft. And this repaint was quite clearly much later than Vermeer. And having established that this paint was false, it was removed very easily with no damage to the underlying. And there you see this typical lovely soft edge to her arm as she leans rather, she caresses the table in the same way that she's caressing the letter which she's writing. It was the most intimate, quiet painting. In fact, I think it's the most quiet, soulful of all of his paintings, as far as I'm concerned.
Part of the magic of Vermeer is to create more than he actually is put down. It could be this sense of more there than there is. And that happens a lot with color. Color, he uses colors so selectively, and you feel this wonderful yellow of her jacket. But when you look at it carefully, you see, in fact, that there's very little yellow there. It's only in those highlights where the light is hitting the form that he's actually using the lead tin yellow to give that focus. For the rest, it's really done in ochres. It's very subtle, very understated. And this is something that he does throughout his career. It's this suggestion of form, suggestion of color, suggestion of space, done with the most minimum of means, suggestion of narrative, suggestion of emotional energy. The feeling of mood is just the hints of these things. So what happens then is that we complete them. He leaves lots of room for us to enter into these scenes and for us to become part of the whole experience, to create it, to fulfill it, to finish it in our own individual ways.
I want to skip to the end, unfortunately, because we're running out of time. This is on YouTube, but it goes for another 11 minutes, and we got 4, but the ending's really good, so sorry.
What year did he live? Was he in the 1500s?
Vermeer lived from, 15, very good. 1632 to 1675.
Thank you.
Act. And he was
so personal about a Vermeer painting.
Life of women in his painting. Men don't come in very often. A woman reading a letter. Women writing a letter. Women delivering a letter. This quiet existence of women. That's much of the poetry of Vermeer.
He rarely painted men, because most of them.
What makes a Vermeer a Vermeer? That's a very difficult question. I've been worrying about that question for about 60 years.
For me, it is that extraordinary quality that he has of inviting you in.
Another meeting in 2 minutes, Joe?
Okay.
Feeling that he creates. He is telling you a story, and yet there's almost like a veil between you and the painting. There is not an immediacy between you and the painting, although you're fooled into thinking there is one.
Something so personal about a Vermeer painting. It's one of these kinds of images that you really want to see all by yourself. You don't want to be interrupted. You don't want to hear noises around you.
Oh, you can't put it into words, really. Just as when you see a great baseball player, when his form is fabulous, what makes him so great? Or there's a great cook and you have a great meal. What makes it so great? Well, you can talk a bit about it, but there's always something you can't put into words.
He raises these themes of life into something that is very, very special. How come that a milkmaid just pouring milk into a jug can produce this moment of magic on a canvas? This extraordinary sense of light, a moment in which you feel there's so much depth. There is so much more than just this simple domestic act. And he raises up these pictures into this ethereal level, which is very hard for us to comprehend. And he really is a genius at making these scenes quite magical and quite mysterious.
Great.
Fantastic, Joe. Thank you.
Amazing.